Everything changed in a matter of seconds. You know the scene. The green and blue confetti falls just coating the pristine turf of Levi's Stadium. The Lombardi Trophy is hoisted up right under the bright, glaring stadium lights, and you can literally see its reflection catching in the tear-filled eyes of a fan base that has waited years for this exact moment. A franchise reaches the absolute, undisputed pinnacle of the sporting world. The air is thick with the smell of victory, champagne, and what looks like an undeniably dominant future. But what happens when the most dominant team in the National Football League, completely fresh off a Super Bowl victory, is met with absolute silence? Welcome to NFL Nexus. I'm your host, and today we are diving deep into a mystery that is currently baffling league executives and billionaires alike. We're using the hard data, the whispers in the corridors of power, and reports from the ground to explain a true, unprecedented billion-dollar paradox. Before we pull back the curtain on this massive financial story, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this explainer, and comment on what you thought down below. And if you really want to support our deep dives, consider becoming a channel member. Okay, let's get right into this because we have a dramatic, almost unbelievable contrast unfolding right now in the Pacific Northwest. Down on the gridiron, the Seattle Seahawks have achieved absolute perfection. They are an unstoppable force of sheer athletic will. But up in the boardroom, shielded by tinted glass and luxury suites, they are facing unexpected and frankly almost eerie struggles.
So you have to ask yourself, how does a Super Bowl champion struggle to find a buyer? I mean, it feels like a script straight out of a Hollywood movie, right? But this is the stark, unvarnished reality of the current NFL business landscape. You have a premium, blue-chip franchise sitting right there. And look, this isn't just any team. This is a team residing in the booming, incredibly tech-rich sports market of Seattle. We're talking about a city boasting one of the most lucrative local television footprints in the entire country. They play inside Lumen Field, which is quite frankly an architectural marvel and a cash-generating fortress with a valuation that literally rivals small nations. They are backed by the 12s, a famously rabid, notoriously loud fan base that basically guarantees sold-out luxury boxes and just infinite merchandise revenue year after year. And on top of all of that, they are currently draped in the ultimate glory of a freshly minted championship. And yet, the market response is hesitating. It's pausing. To truly understand the sheer gravity of this boardroom freeze, we first have to understand the magnitude of what this team has just accomplished on the field. Because the product they are selling, it isn't a rebuild. It isn't some long-term frustrating project requiring years of patience from a new owner. It is a fully operational, finely tuned juggernaut.
Super Bowl LX champions, a 14-3 regular season record, going an unbelievable 14-1 in their last 15 games. Let's really break down the sheer, terrifying dominance of Mike Macdonald's second year as head coach, because it is crucial context. Early in the 2025 season, the Seahawks were, a so-so 3-2 after 5 games. They suffered narrow, truly heartbreaking home losses to the San Francisco 49ers 17-13, and then the Tampa Bay Buccaneers 38-35. People were whispering, right, wondering if they had it. But then, something just clicked. The defensive line started getting home with this terrifying, relentless consistency. They embarked on an absolute tear, finishing the year with a massive 7-game regular season winning streak. Their lone loss in that spectacular 14-1 run? It came in Week 11 against the rival Rams, a super tight 21-19 battle down at SoFi Stadium, where, if you remember, a highly controversial offensive pass interference call completely stalled the game-winning drive right at the 2-minute warning. But when the playoffs actually arrived, they left absolutely no doubt. None. They completely blasted the 49ers in the divisional round 41-6. Just a bloodbath. They edged out the Rams in a 31-27 NFC title game thriller. And finally, under the absolute brightest lights at Levi's Stadium, Mike Macdonald's defense completely humbled second-year quarterback Drake May. They brilliantly disguised coverages, they blitzed from the boundary with zero fear, and they registered a bone-crushing strip sack in the third quarter that entirely, permanently broke New England's spirit. They secured a crushing 29-13 victory, and in doing so, they exorcised the ghosts of Super Bowl XLX and Malcolm Butler with absolute, unquestionable authority.
And the crazy thing is, the foundation of this success is an unstoppable roster that is built to last. You would think a team that lost a massive amount of talent in free agency might naturally take a step back, right? It happens all the time. They lost Super Bowl MVP running back Kenneth Walker III to a massive, fully guaranteed contract elsewhere. They lost cornerstone cornerback Reek Woolen. They lost safety Kobe Bryant and edge rusher Boy Mafe. That is a lot of production walking out the door. But general manager John Schneider? He executed absolute salary cap gymnastics. It was a masterclass. Through incredibly complex void years and brilliant fractional cap hits, he orchestrated this continuous, masterful restocking of the roster without mortgaging the team's future. He identified incredibly specific athletic profiles to plug right seamlessly into McDonald's defensive system. So now you have veteran quarterback Sam Darnold stepping in and managing the offense flawlessly. You have wide receiver Jackson Smith-Jigba, who just elevated his game to unimaginable heights to capture the 2025 NFL Offensive Player of the Year award, just feasting on the defensive voids created by Schneider's personnel chess match. And most importantly, you still have the league's #1 scoring defense, the fewest points allowed in the entire National Football League. This isn't just a good team having a lucky year. It's a perfectly calibrated football machine.
And that machine, it does not stop. While the boardroom sits in this bizarre state of suspense, the on-field product just marches steadily forward through a tightly scheduled, relentless offseason. The coaches and the players, they are completely locked in. On May 1st and 2nd, the team wrapped up its 2-day rookie minicamp running exhaustive, hyper-detailed install drills. We are already seeing the future of this franchise take shape in real time. Reports from the camp were glowing, specifically highlighting 5th-round pick Bo Stevens from the University of Iowa. This massive, incredibly physical blocker was heavily utilized during intensive 11-on-11 drills, playing his natural right guard position while also taking aggressive, meaningful reps at left guard. He proved immediately that he will be a prominent, flexible backup ready to violently push incumbent Anthony Bradford for the starting job. Then, on May 26th, the reigning champions kick off the first of 4 OTA sessions, continuing straight through late May and early June, with attendance already tracking at near 100%. The defensive line is already out there running intricate stunt packages at full game day speed. And finally, from June 9th through the 11th, it's all hands on deck for the mandatory minicamp. The heartbeat of the franchise is strong, it's steady, and it's focused entirely on one thing: a repeat.
But then, we pivot. We shift from the loud, relentless, violent grind of the gridiron to the stark, quiet, almost sterile reality of the business world. According to a massive ESPN report by Seth Wickersham, an anonymous NFL executive described the current market for the Seattle Seahawks with 2 chilling words: it's soft. Another executive openly added, there isn't as much action as there was with Denver and Washington. Now, this is the jarring narrative pivot that makes this story so incredibly fascinating. You have the greatest product imaginable, a freshly minted Super Bowl champion, operating at absolute peak efficiency, generating hundreds of millions in local revenue, and yet, the billionaires of the world are not beating down the door. The frenzied, aggressive bidding war that the league fully anticipated simply hasn't materialized. Multiple league sources are indicating a serious, noticeable lack of intensity from potential buyers. The silence in that boardroom is deafening.
So the absolute crucial point we have to figure out is why. Why is this crown jewel of a franchise officially up for grabs right now in the first place? Well, the Seattle Seahawks have been owned by the estate of the late, great Paul Allen since his passing back in 2018. For the past several years, his sister, Jody Allen, has controlled the team as the executor of a complex multi-billion-dollar trust. And look, under her stewardship, the franchise has maintained its elite status and its deep, deep connection to the Pacific Northwest. But a trust of this magnitude is governed by incredibly rigid legal bylaws and strict fiduciary duties. It's not about emotion. The mandate of the trust ultimately pointed toward liquidating the assets to fund philanthropic endeavors. The executor is legally bound to maximize value, meaning the timing of this sale is purely a function of cold, hard legal obligation, not an emotional desire to part with the team. Earlier this year, having finally navigated the deeply complex legal weeds of the trust stipulations, the franchise was officially put on the open market. And the timing? It seemed impeccable. They were riding the massive momentum of an incredible season, culminating in a Super Bowl LX victory. The stage was perfectly set for a monumental, earth-shattering transaction.
$11 billion. Pause for a second and just think about that number. This was the massive initial projected valuation that the sports business world eagerly, almost hungrily anticipated. And frankly, considering recent history and the underlying assets of the team, it wasn't an absurd projection at all. I mean, we literally just saw a minority stake in the Miami Dolphins sold at a valuation of $12.5 billion. But a full franchise sale? That is different. The league expected an $11 billion price tag because they factored in the astronomical new television distribution deals, the explosive, unprecedented growth of legalized sports betting partnerships, the immense, highly lucrative real estate footprint surrounding the stadium in downtown Seattle, and the inherent, absolute scarcity of the 32 NFL shields. There are literally only 32 of these golden tickets in existence on the entire planet. The valuation of professional sports franchises has been rocketing upward into the stratosphere for years, entirely untethered from traditional market realities. The NFL expected that a team as stable, as successful, and as prestigious as the Seahawks, fresh off a championship, would naturally easily command this $11 billion price tag. They expected a lineup of the world's wealthiest individuals ready to just write a blank check.
But here is the new reality, and it is dropping like a hammer. $9 billion. This is the revised figure currently circulating among highly skeptical NFL owners and executives. Now, obviously, that is still an astronomical sum of money, but it's a massive $2 billion haircut from the initial hype. So why the sudden drop? It really comes down to the intensely strict NFL ownership bylaws and a rapidly shrinking pool of plausible buyers. See, the NFL requires a principal owner to put down a minimum of 30% of the purchase price in liquid cash. At $9 billion, that means an individual person needs to write a check for at least $2.7 billion in pure, unencumbered liquidity. We aren't talking about stock options or real estate value, we are talking about cash. Furthermore, the league strictly limits how much debt an ownership group can take on to actually finance the purchase. When you elevate the price tag from the $5 to $6 billion range all the way up into the double digits, and then you strictly enforce those borrowing limits, the air gets incredibly thin. The number of human beings on planet Earth who can actually pass the NFL's strict background checks, meet those insane liquid cash requirements, and physically sit at the negotiating table, it dwindles dramatically. To really understand the freeze, we have to look at the recent history. It sets the scale. In 2022, an ownership group led by Walmart heir Rob Walton purchased the Denver Broncos for $4.65 billion. That sale triggered a massive, high-stakes bidding war, setting what we thought was a staggering benchmark. Just a year later, in 2023, a highly complex ownership group led by Josh Harris acquired the Washington Commanders for $6.05 billion. That deal pushed the ceiling even higher, but it required a labyrinthine structure of multiple minority partners basically pooling enough cash together just to satisfy the league's rules. Both of those transactions were marked by highly publicized, frenzied momentum. Now look where we are. We are looking at a projected price for the Seahawks of $9 billion. Even at this supposedly disappointing lower estimate, the financial leap required from the Commanders' sale to the Seahawks sale is almost $3 billion. That isn't just a step up, that is climbing a completely different mountain. That is a colossal jump in just 2 to 3 years, requiring an entirely different echelon of wealth. It explains exactly why the current market is marked with quiet hesitation, rather than the frantic bidding wars we saw in 2022 and 2023.
So we really have to ask, why the freeze? Even with that massive financial leap, why is an incredibly stable, championship-winning franchise experiencing a buyer shortage? It comes down to 3 deeply ingrained factors. First, broader market conditions. The macroeconomic environment has shifted dramatically. The Federal Reserve's interest rates are significantly higher now than they were during the Broncos sale, making borrowing billions of dollars exponentially more expensive. Deploying $9 to $11 billion in cash is a uniquely complex undertaking when the cost of capital is highly elevated. Second, the ownership structure itself. The Seahawks are being sold by a trust, which inherently involves a methodical, legally bound, and completely unemotional process. This is not an individual owner looking to quickly cash out and go buy a yacht. The fiduciary duties require meticulous vetting of every single detail. And third, a general lack of urgency. Because the team is so exceptionally well run by John Schneider and Mike McDonald, and because the Paul Allen Trust isn't in any sort of financial distress, there is absolutely no ticking clock forcing a fire sale. They can afford to wait. But the catch is, the billionaires, they are waiting too.
And that brings us to the final fascinating paradox of this whole explainer. We have a massive disconnect between market perception and historical reality. Inside the league's inner circles right now, there is a distinct sense of whispered disappointment, a feeling that the lack of a frenzied bidding war represents a quote-unquote soft market for the reigning Super Bowl champions. Billionaires at league meetings are quietly grumbling that the hype didn't match the reality. But then you have the historical reality of the situation. The reality is that this transaction, whenever it finalizes and whoever actually signs that record-breaking check, will be an imminent all-time NFL record sale price. It's a bizarre psychological trick of the elite sports business world. We are looking at an impending financial milestone of unimaginable scale, a transaction that will literally eclipse the GDP of some small countries, and yet it's being whispered about in the corridors of power as a slight disappointment simply because it didn't hit the absolute highest, most speculative, completely fabricated ceiling.
But make no mistake, $9 billion fundamentally alters the financial landscape of professional sports forever. Despite falling short of the $11 billion hype, the Seattle Seahawks are still virtually guaranteed to absolutely shatter the all-time NFL sale record. A representative for the Paul Allen estate recently noted there is no news to share about the sale process, expertly keeping their cards super close to the vest while the legal maneuvers continue in the background. But a $9 billion transaction proves that the absolute peak value of an NFL franchise is still climbing, even if the ascent has slowed its pace just a little bit. And more importantly, you know the saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. This specific sale price will instantly inflate the valuations of even the lowest-tier NFL teams. It changes the league's economy forever, proving the immense, enduring power of the Shield and the specific premium value of the championship culture that has been built up in the Pacific Northwest.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering, and deeply provocative question to conclude our deep dive today. Have NFL franchise valuations finally hit their ceiling? We are watching a team that just absolutely dominated the NFL, going 14-1 down the stretch, blowing out opponents in the playoffs with defensive mastery and winning Super Bowl LX, yet they cannot trigger a bidding war. If a 14-3 championship juggernaut with an elite defense, an offensive player of the year, and top-tier management struggles to find a dozen billionaires willing to fight over them, what does that mean for the next team that goes up for sale? Are we finally running out of individuals on this planet wealthy enough to actually play this game? It's a question that will undoubtedly define the next era of sports ownership. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive here on NFL Nexus. I truly hope this structured look through the macroeconomics, the bylaws, and the narratives helped you grasp exactly what is happening behind closed doors in Seattle right now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this explainer, and drop a comment with your thoughts. Do you think $9 billion is the absolute limit? And remember, support the channel by becoming a channel member. I will see you in the next explainer.